ruling class economists, anthropologists kept telling us that close to 50 million liters of PMS, petrol, was being smuggled across our borders on a daily basis. Now, let us tell you why this figure is a complete lie. Now, 50 million liters of fuel will require 1,600 fuel tankers with a capacity of 33,000 liters. That means the biggest tankers, the long ones, not the small ones. It will require each 1,600 each to transport across our borders on a daily basis, 50 million liters. What this means is that you need 1,600 trucks to cross the border and come back into Nigeria every day. That's 2 trips.
But over the long term, supply is guaranteed. That's the whole point. When you remove fuel subsidies, more players come in. That is literally the definition of a deregulated downstream sector. There are 3 stocks, I don't know if we'll get time to get into them: Corn Oil, Eterna PLC, and Total. They all ripped yesterday along with the market. You know why? Because investors said that if President Tinubu is removing fuel subsidies, the downstream sector profitability cap will rise, which means that there will be more dividends for shareholders down the line.
Because of our failure to make our refineries work. Refineries that we have, that we invested money to actually build. Because of our failure to make that work, we spent $78 billion annually to import fuel, to import refined products. I mean, who does that? That's stupid.
Still subsidizing. So if you take off 10% now, 20% now, 20%, there's still 80%, 70%, 60% that you're still funding. It has to go by June. So he's got 30 days between now and the end of June. He's got time. The money the subsidy provision in the budget runs out, and you have to
run the econometrics of short-term inflationary pressures on the economy, and also let's run the econometrics of long-term inflationary pressures. Also factor in the variable that your so-called savior refinery, ceteris paribus, kicks in maybe year-end or thereabout. Will it still churn in that, what comes? So does the marketer go to that one to get all of that? Let's just run the econometric analysis and see the impact on the economy.
Short-term prices go up. The central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, at the prior MPC meeting, when he raised rates to 18%, gave 3 price shocks for food inflation. 1, transportation, road transportation. 2, insecurity in food-producing areas. 3, legacy infrastructure issues. Those are your shocks. Fuel passes through to road transportation because over 96-97% of goods are moved by road. So when you hike fuel prices, it translates to transportation of food, it translates to transportation of goods. So that's where you see your short-term inflationary spike. But over the long term, supply is guaranteed. That's the whole point. When you remove fuel subsidies, more players come in. That is literally the definition of a deregulated downstream sector. There are 3 stocks, I don't know if we'll get time to get into them: Corn Oil, Eterna PLC, and Total. They all ripped yesterday along with the market. You know why? Because investors said that if President Tinubu is removing fuel subsidies, the downstream sector profitability cap will rise, which means that there will be more dividends for shareholders down the line. And those companies... No, but diesel is deregulated already.
Yeah, but did this work when this was the arguments we were making when diesel was deregulated? Did it work this way? Did it work like clockwork?
So when you say it worked, diesel is coming. Diesel is coming down. It's at 592 now, from highs of almost 900, because oil prices have been coming down. Yeah. So that is how it works. When oil prices go up, diesel goes up. When oil prices come down, diesel comes down. That is the same. Yeah, these are the stocks now. Okay. The markets validates what the president said at his speech, that he wants to deregulate the downstream sector, and that's why you saw these stocks.
A lot of things are there floating around from government sources, from neoliberal sources. We know that as we speak today, the IMF continues to pile pressure, the IMF and the World Bank continues to pile pressure on our government to remove subsidy, to devalue the naira, and so on and so forth. And so our observations include our countering arguments to the arguments that are being made by these elements. Our first observation is that at the root of the energy crisis is the crass incompetence of the ruling class regimes over the past 3 decades, as well as the tragic failure of leadership and incompetence of the current regime. So we are very clear that this is an historical crisis. And we are clear that it is a failure of ruling class leadership. In the last 6 months, of 2021, on the average, ruling class economists, anthropologists kept telling us that close to 50 million liters of PMS, petrol, was being smuggled across our borders on a daily basis. Now, let us tell you why this figure is a complete lie. Now, 50 million liters of fuel will require 1,600 fuel tankers with a capacity of 33,000 liters. That means the biggest tankers, the long ones, not the small ones. It will require each 1,600 each to transport across our borders on a daily basis, 50 million liters. What this means is that you need 1,600 trucks to cross the border and come back into Nigeria every day. That's 2 trips.
Which we don't always meet, we cannot always meet, because all of our production facilities are old. They are getting dilapidated. Our production cost in Nigeria is one of the highest, per unit cost is one of the highest in the world. So but because of that, we can't even meet the production quota. So every year when OPEC says 1.6 million or 1.8 million barrels per day, we don't even meet it. On the average, in the last 36 years, what we have been doing between 1 million and 1.3 trillion barrels of crude oil per day. That's what we have been exporting. Now, for this, and according to OPEC figures, Nigeria earns about $28 billion dollars from this. Okay? But because of our failure to make our refineries work, refineries that we have, that we invested money to actually build, because of our failure to make that work, we spend $78 billion annually to import fuel, to import refined products. I mean, who does that? That's stupid.
Nigeria have consistently considered a disproportionate and increasingly unbearable component of production and manufacturing in Nigeria. Energy cost as a component of production cost rose from 38% in 2020 to 45% in 2021. A 7% increase. That's energy alone as a factor of production, and the component of the cost of production is costing that much. So if we can reduce the cost of energy, it follows that the cost of production will also reduce. And the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria insists that this is the reason why Nigerian businesses are not competitive. This is the reason why people are taking the headquarters of their companies from Nigeria and going to site them in Accra and in Dakar and in South Africa. That Nigerian businesses are not competitive. Now, finally, in terms of our observations, let us also address the question of subsidy. Because government economists keep saying that subsidy is as if subsidy is a demon, and that subsidy is bad. And we insist that all responsible governments across the world subsidize certain services across the world. In fact, so let's compare ourselves with our peers, other oil-producing countries. Amongst oil-producing countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of them have publicly funded healthcare delivery systems. So there is an healthcare delivery system for the rich that is private. There is a publicly funded one that everybody can access, and it is at little or no cost to the citizens. They also have publicly funded transport services, mass transport services. They also have publicly funded mass public housing, social housing programs. So subsidy is actually really not, a subsidy usually helps an economy to regenerate and catalyzes, the growth of an economy. But in Nigeria, subsidy is actually not a subsidy on production, because that's what they say. They say we are subsidizing consumption instead of production. Given what we said earlier about energy costs to manufacturers, you know that to generate your own electricity, and 80% of power that is consumed in Nigeria is self-generated. That means your face me and face you generator, the medium one and the big one. And 62% of self-generated power is from fuel, PMS, not diesel. That means majority of Nigerians. So in Nigeria, really, fuel is a production, is a factor of production. It's not a factor of consumption. So a subsidy on fuel in Nigeria is actually a subsidy on production, not a subsidy on consumption. So in terms of whether subsidies are permissible in general, we have said yes, everywhere it is. In terms of whether this is a wasteful subsidy on consumption or on production, we have also faulted the argument that in Nigeria, the subsidy on fuel is a subsidy on production, it's not a subsidy on consumption. Now, so what are our demands? And our government is our ruling class is penny wise and pound foolish. From that privatization, they claim that they made $3.1 billion. Just imagine how much we are losing now for selling our assets. So we are very clear that the situation is the same. So let's get back. The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria have estimated that this is why this thing is going to hurt everybody, and that the poor and the middle classes are going to bear and the working poor are going to bear the brunt of all of this. Hikes in fuel price and electricity tariff, which would price these essential products and services out of the reach of the impoverished masses and make energy completely unaffordable to the working people and the toiling masses of our country. The combined implication of all this is that Nigerians would further be impoverished. Businesses, in particular small and medium-scale businesses, will struggle to survive. They will lay off staff, and even they will close up. Big businesses will also struggle with rising production costs, and those who can manage to stay afloat, they will simply pass on the increased cost to the consumers, and this is going to worsen hardship in the country. In initiating the resist hardship struggle and building momentum for mass resistance, we predicate our actions on the following observations as we seek to enlighten the masses and the populace on our reasons for embarking on this resistance and rejecting the energy price hikes. Now, a lot of things are there floating around from government sources, from neoliberal sources. We know that as we speak today, the IMF continues to pile pressure, the IMF and the World Bank continues to pile pressure on our government to remove subsidy, to devalue the naira, and so on and so forth. And so our observations include our countering arguments to the arguments that are being made by these elements. Our first observation is that at the root of the energy crisis is the crass incompetence of the ruling class regimes over the past 3 decades, as well as the tragic failure of leadership and incompetence of the current regime. So we are very clear that this is an historical crisis, and we are clear that it is a failure of ruling class leadership. But we are also saying that there is a current faction of the ruling class that is in power right now that has also failed, woefully, to address the crisis. B, what ruling class regimes and their economists continue to refer to as subsidy, under recovery, and so on, is in fact the outcome of the failure and incompetence of the ruling class in general, and the current regime in particular, to ensure that as an oil-producing country, we have adequate domestic refining capacity to meet our own domestic needs for refined petroleum products. Third, this so-called subsidy exists because of the price differential between the landing cost of imported fuel and the pump price at which you and I buy at the filling station. This differential between the landing cost and the pump price also exists because we are totally dependent on, as a country, on imported refined petroleum products. 4, Nigeria, now this is what should worry all of us as Nigerians, and should further underline the fact that our ruling class is very shameless, is that Nigeria is the only member of OPEC. Mind you, a Nigerian will be stepping down, has been the General Secretary of OPEC for the past 8 years. Will be stepping down in June of this year, okay, after completing his 2 terms. But Nigeria is the only member of OPEC country that imports more than 90 to 95% of refined petroleum products to meet our domestic needs and consumption. In other OPEC countries, the reverse is the case. All other OPEC countries meet their domestic requirements through domestic refining capacity, through their own domestic refineries, and then they export. We are the only country that our refineries have been, we have 4 refineries that have not been able to refine any product in the last 6 years. People are working, managements are there, and money is being spent. Another reason given by the regime and all previous regimes is the narrative around the price of fuel being much cheaper in Nigeria than in our neighboring countries in West Africa. And so they say that because of the subsidy that they have put there, the price is cheaper in Nigeria. And because it's cheaper in Nigeria, it encourages smuggling to other countries. We are going to show you now how fallacious that statement is. So let us examine this fallacious claim. Today, currently, the figures have been bandied around that Nigeria consumes between 54 million liters per day and 90 million liters per day. Sometimes the figure between what they say we consume and what is imported is also extremely very different. Now, in the last 6 months, of 2021, on the average, ruling class economists, anthropologists kept telling us that close to 50 million liters of PMS, petrol, was being smuggled across our borders on a daily basis. Now, let us tell you why this figure is a complete lie. Now, 50 million liters of fuel will require 1,600 fuel tankers with a capacity of 33,000 liters. That means the biggest tankers, the long ones, not the small ones. It will require each 1,600 each to transport across our borders on a daily basis, 50 million liters. What this means is that you need 1,600 trucks to cross the border and come back into Nigeria every day. That's 2 trips. 2 trips a day to go, come back, so that they can go back tomorrow again on a daily basis. And so we ask ourselves, tankers are not needles. Tankers are not spirits. They are not, so how can 1,600 tankers cross our borders? Even if we have a 1,600 kilometer border line, even if each one is positioned and they cross from each 1 kilometer apart, how can a country, how can a ruling class actually justify the fact that 1,600 tankers cross its border every day, 2 trips every day? This requires a driver, at least 1 loader. That is 3,200 persons are involved in this trade. Just there. What about security? What about? So, it's simply a fallacious argument. It is either it is not true, or that the Nigerian state is complicit in the smuggling, and that the Nigerian state is actually providing protection for the smuggling. It's either of those two. It cannot be anything else. When in January 2012, the Goodluck Ebele Jonathan regime unconscionably hiked fuel prices in the name of removing fuel subsidy, there was a justifiable mass outrage, and it precipitated the January uprising of 2012, also known as Occupy Nigeria. Recall that the exact same reasons given by the Goodluck Jonathan regime are the same reasons that this current regime is also giving. So they are saying our refineries are moribund. Jonathan said that 10 years ago, our refineries are moribund. Buhari is saying it 10 years after, our refineries are moribund. Okay? In 2012, Labour and civil society made demands. We put on the table, we said, look, how long does it take to build refineries? And how much does it cost? We agreed then that it will cost between $1.5 billion and $2 billion to build a refinery with a capacity of about 400,000 barrels per day. They said it.
So you have a trade deficit in oil again of about $50 billion. And you do that every time. And I mean, Abatista says that the definition of madness is to keep doing something repeatedly and expect that you are going to get a different outcome. This is what we have been doing. So why is it that we cannot make our own refineries work so that we can actually earn? And it's just because oil is the major revenue earner, but this is a direct reflection and manifestation of our approach to everything economic and the economy in Nigeria. That's why we invest in value chains in agriculture. We say we want to. So now we like those kind of things to brag. We are Africa's largest producer of crude oil. So what? What about refined products, which is actually the ones where you actually earn money because you have added value. That's how manufacturing operates. We invested so much money under this regime and under the previous regime in some agricultural value chains. Starting from Obasanjo, now we are Africa's largest producer of cassava. We are one of the largest exporters of yam tuber. These are raw materials. Cocoa, we say we are restoring our lost glories. We are now exporting. We are now one of the biggest exporters of cocoa again. But all of these are raw materials. They're simply raw materials. The idea is that we export yam, and we are one of the largest exporters of yam. We export yam. Okay, so some farmers are actually going to have their conditions improved because they will earn foreign exchange. Okay? Yeah. We export cassava. But the pharmaceutical industry and every other aspect of industry that requires starch, either pharmaceutical starch or industrial starch as secondary raw material, they import the pharmaceutical starch, they import the industrial starch. Yet you have the raw materials from which you can actually process pharmaceutical starch and process industrial starch. So the amount of money that we think we are earning as a country exporting yam, we pay double importing pharmaceutical starch and industrial starch. So this is the way we have always operated. So something really has to give. We need to have a situation where we begin to focus more on being self-reliant in terms of manufacturing, in terms of production, that we need to produce locally, produce at home. There was one of the governments, Jonathan's government came with Make Nigeria Great. This government, borrowing from that, came with Buy Made in Nigeria. And they launched all of these policies.
The challenge with that, and it's a good policy, Abi, to buy made in Nigeria. But in order for you to buy made in Nigeria, you must first of all produce made in Nigeria. So if you are not investing in producing made in Nigeria, you can't buy made in Nigeria. And that's the challenge. Dangote, for instance, just to give an example from the private sector, that if we had done as a government on a large scale, would have had, ramifying effects in the economy. So Dangote cement, even though those cement companies were also so-called privatized, this thing that was sold to on the cheap to, at the same way we have just sold another Peugeot Automobile Nigeria, sold it to him now, is repackaged now as Dangote pan. that was just inaugurated. Okay, but let's get back to that story. So Dangote Cement, which is the largest in Africa, okay, now they have an arrangement for all the trucks that they use. They have an arrangement with the manufacturing company in China. Okay, actually, yes, yeah, but the factory is in China. Is the Chinese located factory. They have an arrangement with that company, and then they have an arrangement with Innocent, with Anamco. Anambra, yes, which is government owned. They have an arrangement with Anamco, okay, in Nigeria. So the arrangement that they have is that they are buying those trucks from the Chinese factory, but Anamco is now the Nigerian representative of that Chinese farm. And so what they do is that they ship in completely knocked down CKD parts, and those parts are now assembled by Anamco. Okay, now part of that agreement is also that all of these things will come through on airport. So you can imagine what that has done. In fact, Anamco's general manager, managing director, was saying that what that has done for them was that it transformed everything. Because you have an order of trucks of about they've had trucks that they've built trucks for Dangote now of about 5,000 trucks. They have order for another 5,000 trucks into the future, and it's going to have a similar arrangement in terms of petrol tankers for Dangote refinery. Now this is just a company, an individual,
which we could probably do.
Which as a country and as a government we could do.
And Ango will probably start doing this.
That is it. That's what we just need to do. So you have to first of all invest in production. For consumption. Then you can then say, okay, buy made in Nigeria, because you're investing in it. You have Innocent. Why is it that every year the federal government and all of its ministries, MDAs, every year they buy vehicles, they buy cars? Why can't you enter into an agreement with either Nigerian manufacturing companies or Nigerian-based manufacturing companies? Enter into an agreement with them, and they supply what you need, maybe on a quarterly basis. You pay them on a quarterly basis. You are investing in the economy. For the completely knocked down parts, you have people who also make batteries that cars need, and so on and so forth. That's how you have that economic boom, that something that actually uplifts all of the economy, not just by this one, but by focusing solely on what they have been told is our comparative advantage, which is to produce raw materials. By focusing solely on that, we continue to increase the gap between us and the developed countries, because they continue to advance. Okay, they continue to advance, and then we continue to remain stagnant where we are. So even if we are not going back, we are just on the same spot, but they are moving forward, the gap we keep increasing.
So lack of innovation is actually
absolutely at the root of it, and it is a lack of ability to think and to reflect properly, because our leaders base themselves on received wisdom. They don't challenge these received notions and received wisdom. No country emerges, by following those kind of rules. Every country that needs to emerge must first of all look inward and say, okay, what can we do here? How can we, take advantage of the global system, but ensure that our focus is